Welcome to the webinar for investment opportunities in the Dutch solar market. My name is Edwin Koot. I'm the founder and CEO of Solarplaza. I'll be chairing this session with you, with our speakers Peter Segaar and Niels Muller. Welcome, and this is, I will start with a brief introduction about the background and the reason why we organized this webinar. If you stay with me, I will give a short introduction. Maybe you know about Solarplaza and the events we have organized in the past. The webinar we're organizing today is in anticipation of our Dutch conference, the Solar Future, which is coming up in the 26th of May. So in about 2 weeks. It's a sunny country in the Netherlands. We have a very bright sunlight today. So and we're going to talk and discuss the webinar and in the conference the bright future of the Dutch solar market. As you may have known, that we have organized more than 80 events across the globe, but this webinar is specifically about the Dutch market opportunities. Currently, the case is that about 7% of all households in the Netherlands, or family houses in the Netherlands, actually have solar panels already on the roof. So the 350,000 systems and still counting. So it's quite fast. And specifically, if I look at my own history, when I started in solar in 1994. There were literally 5 roofs with solar panels in the Netherlands, and now we have 350,000 in 22 years. So it's in anticipation of the Dutch Solar Conference, the 8th edition already of this biggest solar event in the Netherlands, with high-level speakers and high-level participants. We expect this year again more than 150 people. All stakeholders will be there. And it's always an inspirational event. It's one of the best networking platforms. It's not because I'm saying that, but that's the feedback of our participants. And again, we have some very international keynotes speaking at our event. This time we have Mike Eckert from Citibank in New York, very experienced man in the financial world with respect to renewables. We have Michael Liebreich and 2 more international keynote speakers. Apart from the 20+ Dutch experts that will be on stage. It is the key event to understand the trends in the Dutch market, and we have organized it already 7 times before. So what will be discussed at this conference? The energy supply in the future. Of course, the future of the PV market is not only dependent on the prices of PV systems, but even more on the dynamics of the electricity market. So we will discuss that. Of course, the Dutch market prospects and updates, financing and investment opportunities, practical experience with PV in the Dutch market, and we'll have the international session for with inspiration for growth with keynote speakers and high-level panel discussion. It's a very popular event, and that's also shown in the list of sponsors that will support this event. And you can see that I just added the latest sponsor that came in 1 hour ago, Conergy. But we have a very interesting and nice overview of partners that are supporting this leading event in the Netherlands. Good to know is that the early bird prize for participating in this event ends the 18th of May, so that's very soon. We'll have a business networking opportunity after the event with some limited spots available. And alongside our event, which is taking place in Utrecht, in the Jaarbeurs, which is the biggest exhibition area, almost biggest exhibition area in the Netherlands, there is a very huge event taking place, the Campus Party Europe, with thousands of entrepreneurs and young startups and students gathering, and they will also be participating for a part at our event. So that's also a nice opportunity to meet with these people. Good. Talking about the Dutch market today, Dutch capacity is growing. We've reached the 1.5 gigawatt threshold last year, and that's only 1 year after we broke through the 1 gigawatt barrier. And we're heading towards 2 gigawatts most likely this year, and heading up to 7 gigawatts of installed capacity by 2020. Actually, the number here, 2070 in the graph, is not correct. It's 2020 that we expect to reach at least 7 gigawatts. So it's an interesting and still growing market. What we will discuss is not only the market size, but also the segmentation, where we see that in the Netherlands, most of the installed capacity is in the residential segment. Although commercial is growing, and coming up, and surprisingly now systems are being put on land in the Netherlands. So ground-based systems is also growing, though still a relatively small segment. We'll discuss regulation and incentives as well, for you to better understand what are the actual opportunities, what are subsidies and incentives available to enter the Dutch market. So here you have the face to the picture, the face to the voice. You see my picture up front, and then we have the two speakers. Peter Segaar is the most knowledgeable Dutch PV market analyst. He is an editor of his independent platform Polder PV, probably well known among most of you. And we have Niels Muller, he is director of PwC tax practice and a member of the Global Energy Utilities and Mining practice. He is very knowledgeable on the regulation and incentives, and he will speak after Peter. So what is the, after my introduction in a minute, we'll start with the presentation by Peter Segaar. We'll have 5 minutes Q&A. After that, we'll have Niels coming with his presentation, short presentation about the regulation and incentives, followed by a short question and answering with Niels in particular, and then we have some 10 minutes left for general Q&A. Well, important for you to know is that you can send in questions through the chat function, which is on the right side of your menu. So if you have any questions, please send them in. My colleague is assisting, Ricardo, my colleague Ricardo Maestro is assisting me, and he will collect all the questions so we can address them during the Q&A and during the question session after each presentation. So please do send in your questions, and I can't guarantee that we will deal with all of them, but if you have a triggering and interesting one, we'll make sure we'll discuss. So sheets of the speakers will be made available after the webinar, and I think that is most of the these are the most important general remarks we have to make before we get started. And I would like to start with a poll. If we can, I will look at my colleague to the left, and I will send in a poll, a question which will appear on your screen right now. So if you will take the chance to just click on one of the choices that are seen on the screen. I'll give you a couple of more seconds to make your choice, or let me know on which market segment you are going to focus in the mid to short term. Then we can present you the results in a couple of seconds. I think we'll have them right now, so make them visible. Let me see, 1 second. Yeah, so you see, that's interesting. So most of you are very interested in the utility scale segment. And while the residential segment is the biggest in the Netherlands currently, commercial growing, utility still small in terms of actual megawatts, but is of the highest interest to our listeners today. So that's also useful information for our speakers. They can maybe address some extra attention on this. Good. Thanks for your cooperation on this poll, and I think we'll go to the first speaker. Peter Segaar, he is the most well-known analyst and expert on the Dutch PV market. He has some very interesting slides with detailed information, and we will make the slides available afterwards. So he will go in a quick through all the information on the Dutch market. So Peter, can you hear me?
I'm Peter. Hello, I'm Edwin.
I'll make you presenter in 1 second.
Okay.
Okay. Let me see if your slides are coming up on screen.
Screen. I am there.
Yeah, we're waiting for your slides to appear on the screen. Yes, there they are. Okay, Peter, take it away. The floor is yours.
Thanks for the introduction. Peter Segaar from Polder PV in Leiden, Netherlands. I have got a speeding ticket fund for the Dutch growing market, which is being shown in some slides I want to present to you. This is the development of the number of installations of PV in the Netherlands. There are two curves. The purple one is the peer register of the net managers. Yellow one is a bigger one. That is the Klimaatmonitor from Rijkswaterstaat total dossier, which has more installations than net managers themselves, already reaching 336,000 in the last update, and Klimaatmonitor still has not all the volume, so I'm expecting that at least 350,000 installations could be there in the Netherlands. This is major residential installations, but of course we have a lot of other things coming up, and that shows in particular in the megawatts being added in the dossiers. Again, we have purple the net managers, which are in 1.3 megawatts in the last update. The Klimaatmonitor Rijkswaterstaat curve, which is already beyond the 1.5 gigawatt megawatt, 1.5 gigawatt line in 2015. And the CBS. CBS is of course the most important statistics, National Statistics Bureau orange curve, but regrettably lags behind in reporting. We hope that the first estimate for 2015 will arrive before the Solar Future Conference later this month. They were at over 1 gigawatt in 2014, and normally they always are beyond the Klimaatmonitor marks. There is some strange thing happening here. We can discuss that later, but if the CBS will stay above the Klimaatmonitor, we are far beyond the 1.5 gigawatts in the CBS to be expected. If we look to the year volume added, it's a record volume for 2015. In Klimaatmonitor dossier we have already far beyond 400 megawatts, which is a record of 37% market growth, and we can expect that this will be continuing. One point I want to stress is that there's a big difference between the Klimaatmonitor and the net manager accumulations in 2015 is already surpassing 200 megawatts, and that is a very big problem in statistics. A lot of the volume added is of course residential, but the extra plus has come from commercial and utility installations, and that is the result of the SDE regulation. This started in 2008 with residential systems. This ended with the SDE 2010 regulation because the limit was the lower limit was 15 kilowatt peaks. Most people cannot afford that kind of systems, so they went to the 2011, etc. And the biggest extra was the SDE 2014 regulation, which is in blue, and we see that taking off. There was 883 megawatts allocated for that regulation. Not all of that will regrettably be implemented, but a lot of that volume of course is being implemented, and we're seeing that realization now every day coming, and we are now already at 97 megawatts in the last update. All the SDE regulations together add up to 211 megawatts. This is RVO documentation, which is lagging behind because of administrative issues. CertiQ, which is the TenneT daughter, already has 266 megawatts certified PV capacity, and most of that is SDE volume. And a lot of that is large installations, commercial installations of 100, 200, up to 800 kilowatt peak or whatever. And there are also big installations on land coming on now. This is my interest for the last 2 years. I've inventorized whatever I can on the biggest installation front that goes up till from 15 kilowatt peaks and larger. This section is very incomplete because a lot of installers do not mind anymore about publication or whatever. It's not interesting anymore, so I miss a lot of capacity in this region. But for this area, the large installations, it's very important. I try to keep track of that as good as possible. And then we see a lot of volume being added. When we compare the over 100 kilowatt peak and over installations, we had in 2011 52 installs, and only 2 of them were 1 megawatt or bigger. When we look to the now present update of my investigations, we have already 621 projects larger than 100 kilowatt peak. Of that is 21 projects already larger than 1 megawatt. The biggest install so far, end of December, it was connected to the grid, 6 megawatt Ameland solar park, a free field installation, the very first big one. And the biggest rooftop so far is Wekamp is all at 2.5 megawatts, and this will be accompanied with a lot of other big rooftop installations far beyond 1 megawatt. So this is a continuing business. I'm inventorizing this as good as possible, and especially these numbers, these are megawatts, 38 megawatts with 21 installations, 30 megawatt in 45 installations, separated in categories of volume. So this is growing very fast. This I won't go into detail. From this database I extracted several parameters, and when you're looking to the average system capacity added per year, we see a lot of growth going on from as of 2013 upwards. This is a logarithmic scale, don't forget about that, so you can imagine that the growth is fast. The average system size was 144 kilowatt peak in 2015, and I'm already now at 200 kilowatt peaks. So commercial is really starting to have a lot of impact now, and that is rather new for the Netherlands. As CBS also makes market segmentations, regrettably with a lot of delay. 2014 numbers became available only in December last year, so we have to wait December this year for the 2015 data, but already we see the huge residential impact of 70% of total market volume. But these two blocks are growing already and growing very fast, and these are the agricultural sector. A lot of big installations are now appearing, mostly with SDE incentive realized, roof with eastern, western and southern orientations, so hundreds of kilowatt peaks on one big farm. But also the services sector, which is in particular communities, either with or without SDE, they fill the swimming pool and the community hall and the fire services roofs. They fill with these kind of projects. This is already 25% of the market volume in 2014, and I expect that this has grown at cost of the market share of the residential system. So these sectors are really growing very rapidly. I will not go into detail because that is the task of Niels Muller to emphasize. I just want to emphasize these are all the incentives in the Dutch market, which is very chaotic. There are a lot of incentives because we must attain the 14% renewable energy mix in 2020, and we see that the most important ones are net metering, SD Plus and the EIA. But I let this to Niels Muller to further emphasize. This is a backup slide. If you're looking to the market development, and we are going with more or less straight line with the present growth of the market, this is accumulated volume. The black numbers are from CBS, and we are increasing that to 2017. We are already beyond the 2 megawatt in 2015. Sorry. In the 1.5 gigawatt in 2015, more than 2 gigawatts in 2016 will most probably go beyond the 3 gigawatt level in 2017. We are going to reach the level of Belgium, which they reached a few years ago. So this good news, but there are a lot of problems. Also, of course, one of the big things for net metering market, which should change in 2020, is that we already have seen, this has been decided around Christmas last year, that there has been a shift in energy taxation, the violet bar here, from much more energy taxation on gas, but at the same time, uniquely in the history of the Netherlands, a lot less energy taxation on electricity, and that made the all-in kilowatt hour price fall back from 22.6 to 20 euro cents, and that is a decrease of 11%, which means that the market value of solar electricity for the residential sector has gone down dramatically. So there are also problems we have to, investors have to take into effect, and I want to end this show for you with this slide. So we can go back to Edwin.
All right, Peter, thank you very much for a very insightful presentation. A lot of details, but our listeners are the lucky ones that will receive a download of the presentation so they can study the material later on in more detail. Thanks so much, Peter, for a very helpful overview. A few questions came in, and one of those questions is there a limit to the megawatt installed capacity? I think that here is mentioned, referred to the project size. Is there a limit to the installed capacity?
There's for the SDE regulation there is no limit anymore. That it has been in the past 100 kilowatt peak, but there is no limit anymore. The largest project which has been approved under the SDE 2014 regime is 30 megawatt. It's a big free field installation in Delfzijl in the northern part of the Netherlands. So there is no cap at the top level.
Okay, very helpful. Another question is, can utility scale projects be installed on agricultural land straight away, or are any special permits required? Would you know, or can you answer?
Yes, there are permits required because most agricultural land has a permit only for agriculture destination, and that has to be changed by the community. And one of the big projects, one of the big problems with that is that the farming organization LTO does not like agricultural land being taken away from agriculture perspective and being transformed into an industrial installation such as a big PV solar park. So the permit is really a big threshold to win.
Yeah, and if you look at the market volume, you said in your presentation that it's likely that 2016 will reach the 2 gigawatt threshold, which means that the market will grow with about 500 megawatts again this year. Will most of that still be residential, or do you see a change in the segmentation, in the shares of the segments?
As I said, that residential still is a major component if there is no problem with net metering, etc. So it will still be the biggest segment of the whole accumulation, but the commercial installations will eat away market share of the residential sector. So commercial will grow at cost of the residential sector, but all the market segments will grow. That's my
In terms of megawatts, all of them will, some other question, which is might be a little off topic or not, but it's regarding PV plus storage. Do you see that already emerging in the Dutch market?
No, there are experiments going on everywhere on the world, and also in the Netherlands. There's a very exciting experiment in Drenthe, in Odoorn, where a farmer is storing his surplus in a container with lithium-ion accus, and then he's selling back to the grid at the time that there's a high kilowatt-hour price. But that's a very huge investment, and for the residential market, it's not profitable anyhow, because the net metering law claims you can put anything on the net if on the yearly basis you do not have a surplus as respect to your consumption. So storage per se is not an incentive as of now, but it can change rapidly if the net metering circumstances will change.
Yeah, well, we'll probably discuss that in the next presentation as well about the net metering, and it's indeed very interesting that you mentioned the project in Odoorn, because one of the parties that has been involved in this project will be one of the speakers. at our conference discussing this very interesting project, where they realized a storage project, a big-scale storage project, and trying to develop that without any incentives, just making solar electricity competitive for the wholesale market. Maybe a final question here is one regarding the small systems, smaller than 600 watt peaks. Is there still interest for this type of system, because there was a special regulation regarding whether you can use and apply this and connect this to an existing socket in your house. Is there still is this market segment still developing? Would you know that?
Hardly, because well, we have 250, 260 watt peak panels nowadays, so we have only 2 or 3 panels per micro inverter on one socket, and that's hardly interesting anymore. So most installations are already far beyond 1-2 kilowatt peak at the residential level. They are still there. There are still people who want 2 panels. I also see even in new building areas for accomplishing the EPC, the energy prestation the energy prestation contract, EPC.
Yeah.
Even in that sector, I see sometimes that only 1 or 2 panels are being installed on a rental roof, for example. So it's still happening, but at a very moderate level.
Okay. Thanks so much, Peter, for these insightful answers on the questions that came in through the chat function. So please, listeners, do send in your questions. We'll go over to the next speaker. Peter, thanks so much again. And I will switch now to Niels. I'm going to make him the presenter. And if you have a second, then Niels, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'll hear you.
Great.
I still have to. Can you show up the presentation?
Oh, they should be there.
Yeah, there it is.
Can you see them now?
So, yeah, we can see it. So go ahead,
Great.
Niels.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and just to briefly introduce myself, I'm working in the tax practice at PwC and specialize on renewables. I've been involved in a wide variety of solar PV projects in the Netherlands, from commercial utility scale to let's say the products that are developed to help households to finance their solar PV. And what I wanted to do in the coming, let's say, 10 minutes is just give you a brief overview of the main incentives. Some of them have been touched upon by Peter, and many thanks for that, Peter. Let's see how much we still should spend on, for example, SDE. SE is more for the large-scale projects, as you've seen in the slides that Peter presented, and net metering also works on larger-scale projects, but gives a specific advantage to households. So I'll come to that, back to that in a second. And then there's a third category that is interesting, or maybe become more interesting, and that is the postal code cooperatives or postcode-roosregeling, and I'll also discuss that briefly in a second. And then of course there's the energy investment deduction, which will also be discussed briefly. So let's first look at SDE. The SDE system has been operating for a while, as Peter mentioned. Especially the rounds of 2014 and 2015 have given quite a few new projects. The SDE subsidy is a guaranteed level of revenue for a period of 15 years. Although this guarantee is up to the base energy price. So a dipping energy price would still be the risk of the operator of the solar PV system. As you can see, there's a compensation between the predetermined level, the levelized cost of energy for solar, and the wholesale electricity price, and that price is being paid out, or that difference being paid out by Dutch government. Well, I think one of the main risks at this stage is the dipping energy price and what to do with that. In terms of new projects, the SDE Plus for this year has just closed, so for the spring round, and in October we'll have a new round, but the real question is, will we have budget enough to accommodate solar PV? Because all of the renewable techniques have to compete against each other, and there's some other forms of renewables that will be first in terms of budget allocation, one of them being biomass. So there's quite a few larger biomass projects coming into the market, so we'll have to wait and see what will remain for solar in that particular round. So the system has to be more than 15 kilowatt peak, as mentioned by Peter, and there's also needs to be a large-scale consumer connection, een grootverbruikersaansluiting.
Niels, can I interrupt you for a second? Can you
Sure.
enlarge your presentation to a full screen size, because there's a lot of detail on your slides.
Oh, sorry about that. Let's see how that works.
If it's too complicated, then let's continue.
Well,
maybe not.
I'm not sure. Is there a button to do that? Because it just shows like this on my screen.
Let's continue otherwise. Let's continue. Let's not go into.
Okay. Yeah. So I think the detail in the let's say the lower part of the slide, that's only to show you, let's say, how RVO comes up with the basic energy price and the correction amount. It's just to give you an indication of the amount at stake for the last round, the 2016 spring round. Let's say in 2014 and 2015 we've seen quite a few projects that have been in phase 9, so that's the 14 cents per megawatt hour. So that per kilowatt hour. So that I think that is sort of the benchmark for the older systems. One of the requirements is that there needs to be a permit in place, and if there is if it's not your own site, then a declaration of the owner needs to be sent in with RVO. And also for systems exceeding 500 kilowatt peak, a feasibility study is required. So I think more in general, I think the SDE system is quite a robust system that operates well, and I don't think we can expect an awful lot of changes to the system itself. The main question is how much budget will be available in let's say the higher tender amounts for solar for this year. But for existing allocations of the SDE, I think there's an interesting market now, and there's a lot of the projects are being built and are also seeking for financing. So that's maybe something for foreign investors to have a look at in more detail. And in our workshop during the conference, we'll go into some more detail in terms of the financials. But for now, I'd like to go over to the other incentives. The second one being net metering or netting, as also referred to by Peter. This is the bulk of the installations so far is still used under this net metering concept. I think one of the reasons is that it is quite a generous facility, because the total amount of the energy price can be netted on a sort of a yearly basis. That used to be about 23 cents, and now depending a bit on how much you pay for your electricity, is around 20 cents. So there is quite a deduction there, and that is exactly the shift that the energy tech has made. So there's more energy tech now on gas and less on electricity, but even so, there's still quite a robust amount available. There are quite a few leasing and financing structures in the market, helping consumers to buy their solar PV. The main issue there is that the consumer should have sufficient economic risk to be viewed as the operator of the system. Otherwise the facility is not available. And the big issue at this stage is that the policy has been confirmed up to 2020, but what the future policy will be is unclear. We're talking to various market parties what that new policy should entail and when there should be more clarity on that. And in our view, that clarity should be there as soon as possible because, of course, only a 3-year horizon for a solar PV system is way too short. So we will need to have something in place, and how that system will look like is the big question. It will probably be a transitional system anyways because also related to one of the questions, it's expected that more storage options and let's say a different way of taxing the consumer will find its way to the market, let's say by 2025 or something. So in the meantime, the big question is what will happen with net metering and will there be grandfathering. So that's something that is high on the agenda, and we're also raising this with the ministry and trying to get some further clarity there. Just on household consumers, since 2013 the VAT on the system can also be claimed back. So for a consumer that is actually buying the system itself, he can claim back the VAT on the system. That helps reduce costs by 21%, so that is an important item. The energy investment deduction, and sorry for the slide being a bit short, we'll go into that in the workshop as well. There's about a 14% benefit to investors that are eligible for the energy investment deduction. That mainly applies to larger scale solar PV systems, and it's a deduction from your tax bill, so you do need to have operating income or taxable income in the Netherlands to actually benefit from it, and it works as an actual deduction from your income. But the end result is 14% of the price that you actually pay for the system. So it is something to bear in mind when you do your calculations. And then finally, let's say the sort of the third main incentive Dutch government is proposing is the postal code cooperations, or the postcode-roosregeling. It's quite a complicated arrangement altogether because it only applies for members that set up a cooperative in a certain postal code region, and this cooperative needs to hold legal and economic title to the production installation, and then the members will get a energy tax deduction, which one-on-one relates to their specific interest in the cooperative. So if they hold a, let's say, 5% interest in the installation, 5% of the actual production of the installation will be administratively netted with their energy tax bill, and they don't pay energy tax and VAT on that specific item. But it's a fairly complicated system, and so far we haven't seen too many of these cooperatives being actually live. However, with the increased deduction to 100%, it may well be that it will be more interesting for individuals to form a cooperative and set up these type of structures. It cannot be combined with SDE, so you do need to get all of your all of the benefit from this energy tax deduction. This deduction or this facility is part of the energy agreement, so for now it will remain in place. There is a revision of the energy agreement for next year, so well, depending on the success of this specific facility and also depending a bit on the new Dutch government probably, we'll have to wait and see whether it will remain in place or whether it will be replaced by something else. Overall, and I think that's in line with the comment that Peter made, it's quite a complicated world altogether with various facilities, and I think what we would like to see is that these facilities are more streamlined and more sort of brought in line with each other. One of the things to bear in mind is, especially on the energy tax side, is that the willingness of Dutch government to accommodate further there or change things is very limited. Energy tax has a budget of 4.4 billion last year. So that's all government revenue, so they're very reluctant to change anything there. Hopefully, and I think we have to look at next government to see whether there could be some streamlining here still. At the moment, I don't see a lot of changes for this year. And the same goes for storage. There's indeed no incentive. There's actually a disincentive for storage because of the net metering system. You get 20% or 20 cent, 21 cents for putting your electricity on the grid. And the investment is nil. So anything you store doesn't really help you. And we are involved in various of these new incentives, also grid to vehicle and some other more innovative structures, and their energy tax is more a burden than an incentive for storage. So I think also there we need to look at government to streamline their policy a bit. I think that's more or less the broad rundown I had. This is a bit on PwC. We're doing a lot of work in the energy sector and keeping on the forefront of all of the sort of developments there. So that's not something we need to discuss here. So if there's any questions, please let me know.
Okay, Niels. Thanks so much for an insightful overview of the incentives and regulation in the Netherlands. There have been some questions posted by the attendees. And so, yeah, one of them, and it's actually the last one that just came in about the policy change. Are you actually advising yourself, or is PwC advising the government on the regulation?
We're not advising government at this stage. We have been advising government on various policy items also in relation to energy tax, but on the on this particular topic we're in talks with some other parties that want to be advised on this and want to have a sort of a better discussion with government.
Yeah. So with respect to the SDE, which is the most important regulation right now, the most important incentive as it looks for the market development, there is nothing known yet for the 2016 rounds. Is there? So how much budget will be allocated for PV?
Well, there is a total budget for SDE in 2016, but the exact allocation to solar, especially in the autumn round, that's not being made public, no.
No, so
but
yeah, that was a question.
The fear in the market is that the other techniques, which are auctioned at the same time, but they share in the same budget. So the fear in the market is that onshore wind, but especially biomass, will take out such a large portion of the overall budget that for solar there will be less remaining.
Yeah. There was also a question about the financing scheme for the SDE, and the question is, how does the SDE financing scheme work in year 16? And I think, yeah. So can you comment on that? Do you know how that works? So after the 15 years of financing through the scheme, what happens in the year 16?
Well, in the end, it depends on how much you claimed from the subsidy, and you will make a calculation over the first 15 years, and then depending on how much you claimed under the facility, there will be either a little bit of budget available, but it can also be that in the first 15 years you will have your full budget used up.
Yeah.
So it
maybe
depends on how much you claim under in the first 15 years.
Related to this question is anything that your system generates over the 950 kilowatt hours per kilowatt peak, can that still get paid?
Well, there's a maximum of 1,000. So That's where it ends per year.
Yeah. Okay.
But we'll do some calculations in the workshop. So I think it will be good to have a bit of a calculation to show how it actually operates also in the last years, and also in terms of exceeding the production capacity.
Well, that's a very nice incentive and promotion of the of attending the conference, Niels. Thank you. I think indeed it will be very interesting to work with you guys.
Yeah, it's difficult to share that in 10-minute presentation by webinar, but there's more to be said there.
Yeah. Okay. One last question before we do the general question and answer, and also invite Peter again to join in. Yeah, there is a question here that is, do you expect that any policy changes that allow the financial and or lease constructions where electricity is sold to the roof owner based on the actual generated kilowatt hours? It's, in Dutch it's called rekening en risico. So do you expect any policy changes on this issue? Or can you answer this question, or is it?
Well, yeah, I can answer it, and I think what I would expect is that for the moment I don't think they will be making any policy changes up to the moment that they will actually explain what the new system will be. We had quite a bit of discussion on the rekening en risico item, so the for whose risk and reward this particular panel is being used. There is an exemption for housing corporations where you have a bit of a different system which allows tenants to use the facility. But it's very difficult to change the law there, and I don't expect the Dutch Ministry of Finance coming up with changes to that in this particular year, especially not because the elections are coming up. There's budgetary constraints, especially on energy tax. So for now I would expect it to remain as it is, unless Parliament picks it up and would demand changes. And that is something we've seen now a couple of times, also in relation to electric vehicle charging and some other developments. So perhaps if Parliament picks it up, we will see some changes, but for this year I wouldn't expect big changes there. I think they will wait for the new system and to explain the new system and then take it all in one go. Okay.
I've also unmuted Peter. If you can join in again for the question and answers. Peter, are you still there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay. Yeah, since so many people that attend this webinar are so interested in utility scale projects, can you both give your view, your perspective on what is happening in this segment and what do you expect to happen? Niels, can we start with you? As an advisor, do you see a strong increase in the interest for utility scale projects, and maybe you can share some of your experiences of what kind of project these are?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think most of these projects relate to the existing SDE, as Peter pointed out, and you see that quite a bit of that SDE is still unused. So there's quite a bit of time pressure for parties to actually develop these projects, and in that respect, I would definitely assume that there's going to be a lot of these projects on the market at the moment. Yeah, I think that the main issue is finding suitable land and making actually sure that the projects come on stream, because a lot of the SDE subsidies have been granted without a thorough check on whether all the requirements are met and whether the money is actually there. So we still have to wait and see how many of these projects will actually go live.
Yeah. So Peter, do you have any comments to add on that, on what you see as trends in the utility scale projects markets?
Yes, there is enormous interest in utility scale projects. I have, separate from my realized PV project, big installations spreadsheet, I also have a spreadsheet on plans, and that accumulates to 1.6 gigawatts of plans. And of course those plans are very fresh to almost totally financed, and everything in between is already happening. A large volume of total is of course the free field, the solar parks on ground installations. Those are many hundreds of megawatts in the pipeline, but it depends very much on the approvals, the permits, the hopefully no interference by organizations such as LTO, etc. So there is a lot of interest, there are a lot of plans, but the big problem, the big question mark is what will be realized of that huge portfolio of plans. 1.6 gigawatt, don't forget it, it's enormous.
So, and if you look at this huge amount, which indeed is impressive, what do you think if you look at since most of our attendees at this webinar are foreigners, where will be the biggest opportunities for them? Is there an opportunity for investors to step in, or new EPC contractors? What would you consider to be the most interesting?
This is asked to me, Peter. I would say that the biggest hurdle to take is to have a very good relation with the community in which the plant is being planned, and a very important extra factor, you must relate, you must have a participation of the people living in the community, because if you get those people against you, you can forget about the project. You must have a part of the profits somehow being turned back to the people living in the community where you plan the park.
Yeah, can you share, because this is also a question that was posted, what the average period is for the development of a utility scale installation? Do you have any figures on that?
That's again with asked to me. I see projects with a delay of 1 year or 2 years, so you can calculate certainly for the bigger projects on the ground for 2-3 years, I think. If resistance to these kind of projects is growing, then you will have to have a very good business case, including the resistors in the community where you plan the park.
So this is really like with the wind projects, it's a not in my backyard syndrome applying.
Yeah. Certainly.
Niels, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think I fully agree with Peter. I think it's very important to have the local community involved. I think I would also say that let's say the local city council or the local government, they have quite a strong say in terms of permits and all that sort of requirements. So I would get them involved as well, and most of them are very willing to accommodate renewable energy within their boundaries. So we did quite a few studies for local government, and they have quite a different view on and a more positive view on renewables than central government. So I would definitely get them involved, and also incentivizing local community. That can be done through for example a bond structure, or set up these type of postal code arrangements, or there's various ways of getting local government or local community involved, and local community may even provide for a cheap form of financing. So in the end, I think it comes down to good planning and making sure that all stakeholders are aligned.
And if I hear you well and listen carefully, then it would mean that for a foreign company, it's almost a necessity to work with a local Dutch company together to develop a project, is it? Because you have to build a relationship.
Especially if you look at larger scale, utility scale projects, yes. So if you look at, for example, systems that would be put on the roof of office buildings or general industrial buildings, I think it's easier. There's not so much resistance from local community. But if you really look at ground-mounted systems with large impact on local community, that is typically something I would do with a local developer, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. a question that came in was also was regarding the bigger projects and if there are any PV portfolios already being set up and being aggregated. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, this is Niels again. Yeah. There's certainly parties that are trying to set these portfolios up, but it's I think it's still quite early days for that. So I'm not sure what sort of ticket size we would be looking for, but I haven't seen very large portfolios at this stage. But there are certainly parties in the market that try to form portfolios now. Yeah.
Yes, Peter.
Sorry. Yeah, what you see at a smaller scale is that, for example, big industrial parks with all the companies together try to have a SDE approval for one big solar park separated on different roofs in that solar park. That is one of the bigger trajectories in the SDE portfolio.
Yeah. Question for you, Niels. Do you know, or can you share some information on an average IRR for a big solar project for 1 megawatt in the Netherlands? Do you have any figures on that? Ballpark figures?
Yeah, that very much depends on a couple of things. Mainly, what are you paying for in terms of rent for the roof or the soil you've been putting your system on? Certain projects may make quite a handsome IRR if, for example, local government is willing to provide a land lease for a nominal amount. But if you pay a significant amount, then of course it's a much different ball game. So it's rather difficult to give a ballpark, but maybe
this is also the question you're going to answer in the workshop at the conference. Is it? To play around with some of the numbers?
Yeah, we'll try to give some insight as to what happens if you pay X or Y for your ground lease or X or Y for your panels and for your financing, and then you can see what it does to your IRR. But it's very difficult to give a ballpark figure because some of the projects I've seen they'll have 5 or 4 or 3% IRR, whereas some others may run well over 10. So it very much depends on the project itself.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. We have to round off in a bit, so I have 2 more questions. Let's start with you, Peter, because one is the question related to the 1.6 gigawatt of project pipeline that you mentioned. And the question is, are these paper projects, so not fully developed, and don't they have subsidy in place, or how would you qualify them?
I think at least 1/3 of that is in different stages of true realization from having an SDE subsidy or having already a PCR entrance, something like that. And that has not been a subject of this discussion, crowdfunding is also becoming very important, all kinds of crowdfunding. So you can, for example, have an SDE project combined with crowdfunding and have a very good business case. But the biggest mode, of course, of that 1.6 gigawatt is plan, and plan can be very fresh to already more or less with project details being mentioned, but a lot of that still has to be fulfilled. Many of them will try to claim SDE subsidy, but we not know yet if they will manage that. If they have the subsidy, they will be carried out. If they do not have the subsidy, they will not be implemented. So a lot of that 1.6 gigawatt portfolio is a big question mark, but a serious amount of that, 1/3 I think, is truly capable of getting realized within short notice for only a short financial gap to fill, up till 1-2 years that they will find the financing for realization. So I think that is 500 megawatts is very well profitable, I think, if there's no problems occurring in the realization phase.
Okay. Very last question then for Niels. Apparently there are international executives listening that are looking at Europe as a market and they're comparing like what's happening in the UK with what's happening in the Netherlands. Niels, I don't know if you can answer this question, but if UK developers are looking at the Dutch market, do you see any key differences between the UK and the Dutch market? I don't know if you can answer this question.
Well, very generally, I think at the moment, at least for the solar PV market for households, I think the UK has trimmed down the benefits quite significantly. So I think in terms of the actual incentive per kilowatt hour in the Netherlands, that is quite significant. So our net metering subsidy. And I think also our SDE system, if you're able to obtain the 14 cents per kilowatt hour, that's still, compared to other markets, quite a significant subsidy. So I'm not sure how the UK government will continue its policy, but what I hear, at least from our UK colleagues, is that market is quite an uncertain market at the moment. Same goes for the Belgian market. So I think in that respect we're looking at quite an interesting market from an European perspective, but we also have some challenges because we have a small country and quite a lot of rules to obey to. So it's finding the right project.
But if I listen to you, and if I may conclude that you're quite optimistic about next year and the coming years, let's say until 2020, with respect to the opportunities in the Dutch market.
Yeah, and I think we have to, because we have this energy accord or agreement in place, and Dutch government has set very ambitious goals in terms of our renewable production, and we're lacking behind in several ways. So if at all we can boost this by stimulating solar, I think Dutch government will do that. So
yeah, okay. Peter, are you equally optimistic?
Yes, I'm very optimistic for the coming years, and it remains in the hands of the politics to have, at last, for the Netherlands, a stable incentive portfolio, so that all the partial segments, sectors in the PV market can grow at a not at a very dramatic rate, but at a good rate, so that all the parties in the Netherlands can participate in the energy transition. This is very important, because if you lose that, you will lose everything.
Yeah. Well, let's not hope for that, but I think it's good to hear that both of you are quite optimistic for the coming years, and that should be a nice incentive in itself for foreign companies that are exploring the opportunities in the Dutch market. And be most welcome to join our Solar Future Conference on the 26th of May in Utrecht. Tickets are still available, and you will meet there all the major stakeholders that are active in the Dutch market. And if you have anyone in particular that you would like to meet, we can we will be very glad to help you and connect you with the right persons. I would like to thank again Niels Muller and Peter Schaaf for their wonderful contributions to this webinar. Thank you both, gentlemen, and I would like to thank you, all the listeners, for joining this webinar. And you have seen the screen, the upcoming other Solarplaza events. I look forward to meeting you in the Netherlands or in one of our other events. Thanks so much, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.